We're going to cover section 5.9, and this time we're actually going to have a number in front of our x squared term. Now, in the other problems there was a number, but that number was 1. But now, when we're solving or factoring these trinomials, we are going to have a number other than 1 in front of x squared, which is going to make our problem a little bit more difficult, because we're going to be looking for larger factors. So for this problem, I need the steps that I'm going to follow is, now there are all different techniques out there, and there's all kinds of neat tricks. However, what I found is when I teach the tricks, people get confused about the tricks. So I'm actually going to teach you how to factor this using factor by grouping. So here's how we're going to go about solving these. Now, the book, if you look through the explanation of example 1, they're teaching you to do this by guessing and testing. So what you're going to do is, the book shows you to list all the factors of this term, all the factors of the last term, and then find the combination that will FOIL together. Now, I'm okay with you doing that. However, if you use this technique, you're going to be doing 6 different, six different FOIL problems until you find the one that works. So instead, I'm going to teach you a technique called factor by grouping. So what we're going to do here, when we factor by grouping, we are going to multiply the first number with the last number. So 2 times -9, or 2x squared times -9 gives me -18x squared. Just like in the previous lessons, I'm going to be listing the factors of this number. So I need to find the ways that I can multiply to get a -18x squared. So those are going to be, and again, remember from yesterday, the sign of my middle number is going to be the sign that goes on my larger factor. Because technically, when I list the factors of -18, I could multiply a -1x times a +18x, or I could do -2x times 9x. I could do -3x times +6x. And that would be it that way. But then remember, you can also do +1x times -18x, +2x times -9x, +3x times -6x. Now remember, if you remember my trick, that the sign of the middle number is the sign that goes on the larger factor. So these are going to be the ones that I consider, because these have the larger number being positive. So this would eliminate me having to check these. So then now I need to look through these 3 sets of factors to find the one that when I add the factors, I get +7. So notice if I take the middle one and I add -2x plus 9x, this does give me 7x. So now that I found the 2 factors, now I'm going to turn my trinomial into a 4-term polynomial. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to rewrite the first term, the 2x squared. I'm now going to replace this +7x with these 2 factors I just found. So -2x plus 9x, and then I rewrite the last term. I've now replaced the 7x with -2x and +9, the factors of that -18x squared. I now need to group my 4-term polynomial. So I'm going to make a group of the first 2, and then I'm going to make a group out of the second 2 terms, or the last 2. I'm now going to look for a greatest common factor between each of the numbers in each of the groups. And it's going to be a different greatest common factor for each group. So for here, my greatest common factor is 2x. So I'm going to factor that out. What remains is x plus 1. I'm going to factor out a greatest common factor of my second group, which is going to be 9. Positive 9. And again, I'm left with, I'm sorry, my sign's wrong here. This is a minus. Everybody with me so far? So all I've done is group them, looked for a separate greatest common factor between each group. I now have two terms here, this term and this term. Notice now I also have another GCF. My GCF is x minus 1. And then I take the two numbers that were factored out and put them in a parenthesis together. This is now my factored trinomial. At this point, you should FOIL this. If it does not go back to the beginning trinomial, you've messed up somewhere. Whether you missed a sign, picked a wrong GCF. So let's FOIL this and double check that it does go back. So when I do first, I get 2x squared. Outside gives me 9x. Inside gives me negative 2x. And last will give me the negative 9. When I group the middle, I do get the 7x. So it does go back to my original trinomial. So my answer here is x minus 1 times 2x plus 9. The order that you write it doesn't matter. Now, let's say we didn't put, let's go back to the beginning and do this again. So again, when I put in my factors of negative 2x and positive 9x, it doesn't matter the order you put them in. So if I rewrite it, and instead of putting the negative 2x first, let's say I put the 9x first. Just want to show you it doesn't matter which way you put your two factors into the problem, because I'm still going to get the same answer. So watch what happens here. Again, I need to make my groups. When you do factor by grouping, the two numbers you get after you divide, or the two binomials, they need to be the same. So watch what happens when I do it this way. I'm going to look for my greatest common factor of my first group, and that's going to be x. So then here, I'm going to factor it out, and I'm left with 2x plus 9. I'm looking for a greatest common factor of this group. Notice the only common factor here is going to be 1, but if I only factor out a greatest common factor of positive 1, it does not make my binomial look the same. So what I'm actually going to divide by is a greatest common factor of negative 1. And then when I do that, my signs flip. And now my two binomials here look the same. They need to look the same when you factor by grouping. This common factor now, I'm going to write it here. And then you take the two numbers that you factored out, those greatest common factors there, and put them in a parentheses. Notice I got the same answer as I did when I put the negative 2x first. Let's try another example. So for this one, again, my first step is to multiply the beginning and the end. 14 times 5 gives me 70. So I'm looking for the factors of 70x squared. Notice my end term is positive, or this is a positive 70. So this tells me my signs need to be the same to multiply to get a positive 70. However, notice my middle term is negative. So this tells me both of my factors are going to be negatives. So when I do this, I'm doing negative 1x times negative 70x. Because when I multiply a negative times a negative, I'm going to get my 70. So then here I'm going to try 2x times negative 35x. I'm going to keep listing them until I find negative 17x when I add them. So I need to keep going here. So 3 won't go into 70. 4 won't go into 70. Let's try 5. So 70 divided by 5 goes in here once. And then it'll go in here 14 times. Notice I'm still not reaching what I need. So let's keep going. 6 won't go in there, but 7 will. So negative 7 times negative 10, when I add those, I do get negative 17. And when I multiply them, I get the positive 70x squared. So now I'm going to set up my 4-term polynomial. You rewrite the first term, so the 14x squared. I'm going to put in the 2 factors that I just found, so negative 7x and negative 10x. Again, it does not matter the order that you put those in there. If you put the negative 10x first, you're still going to get the same answer. So now, again, I need to make my groups. I need to look for a greatest common factor of the first group, which is going to be 7x. I'm going to divide. And now I need to find a greatest common factor of my second group. Notice it looks like it's 5. But again, remember, watch what happens if I just divide it by positive 5. Notice I get negative 2x plus 1. Remember I told you that when we do this grouping, these two need to look the same. Right now they don't look the same. In order to make them look the same, what I'm going to pull out is, instead of a positive 5 GCF, I'm going to pull out a negative 5. So now, when I divide negative 10x by negative 5, that now gives me the positive 2x I need. And when I divide positive 5 by negative 5, I get negative 1. So again, if these two do not look the same, then you either pulled out the wrong GCF or you can't factor it by grouping. So again, you're going to write the one that's in common, the 2x minus 1, and then put the two numbers you pulled out as your GCFs. Put them together, and again, this would be your answer. Again, I highly recommend that you FOIL. So let's FOIL it, because again, the foiling is going to save you. Okay, maybe you chose the wrong factors. So by foiling this, this will catch any mistakes that we make. So then we get negative 10x, inside gives me negative 7x, and last gives me positive 5. So when I group the middles, I do indeed get negative 17x, and it did go back to my original. So it checked. So my final answer here is correct. It's the 2x minus 1 and the 7x minus 5. Again, the order doesn't matter. Let's try another example. So again, what we're going to do is, now it's backwards. Now, for this one, I'm going to rewrite it. Now, we can factor it this way. However, we really don't want, when we get into more difficult quadratics, we don't want a negative x squared term. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to rewrite this so that my x squared term is out front. but I'm going to get rid of that negative sign by dividing all of my terms by -1. So now it becomes positive x squared minus 11x minus 10. This is something that will be important for you later on when you're working with quadratics. So now what I need to do is my normal process. Just remember that in your final answer to put the -1 out front. So let's go ahead and repeat the process. We're going to multiply the beginning and the end. So we're looking for factors of negative 60x squared that when I add them, I get negative 11x. So again, we're going to start our organized list. Again, when I'm looking for a negative number when I multiply, this tells me my signs need to be different. And again, the middle term determines the sign, which factor gets what sign. So my bigger number is going to be negative. So positive 1x times negative 60x, because my bigger factor gets the negative sign. Positive 2 times negative 30. And again, as you're listing these, quick add them mentally to see if it's giving you a negative 11. And then 3x times negative 20x. Still not there, I'm at negative 17. 4x times negative 15x. Notice when I add these, I do get the negative 11. So now I'm going to turn this into my 4-term polynomial. So I'm going to put the -1 out front because I don't want to forget about it. So rewrite the 6x. Remember, now we're replacing the negative 11 with these two numbers we just got. Again, it doesn't matter the order you put them in. I'm going to put the 4 first, and then the 15, and then rewrite the last term. I now need to group them. So I make a group here, and here, and here, and here. My greatest common factor here is going to be 2x. So I'm going to factor that GCF out, and I get 3x plus 2. Over here, again, remember we want it to look like 3x plus 2. So my greatest common factor I'm going to plug in. Okay, so -5, -5. When I divide, I get positive 3x and positive 2. Again, you're going to take these two, put them together. Also take the thing that's in common, the 3x plus 2. And don't forget about your -1 out front. Now, I know in the book it's backwards. However, this will also FOIL back to the same answer. In order to check this, let's go ahead and check it. So what we would do first is we're going to FOIL these two, and then we're going to distribute the -1 back in there. And then it should go back to this one right here. So let's go ahead and try it. So when I FOIL this, I get 6x squared plus 4x minus 15x minus 10. Group the middles. So far, it's looking like what we had in here. And then now if I distribute the -1, and I get -6x squared plus 11x plus 10, which is what I had right here. And even if I rearrange it and put it back to the 10, the 11, and this, it looks the same. Now, you can factor it from this point if you want. Just know later on in Algebra 2, it's going to be important that our leading coefficient in front of our x squared is positive. Okay, but you could factor it the way it was originally given to you. And that's the way that the textbook explains that example. Any questions on this so far? All right, I'm going to do example 4 from your textbook. It's 5a squared minus ab minus 22b squared. So I'm going to multiply, and when I multiply 22 times 5, I get 110. So what I'm looking here for, and this is really large, I know, we're looking for two numbers that will multiply to give me negative 110a squared b squared. So I'm going to start my list. Again, remember, we're trying to make it add up to be negative 1ab. So this tells me that my numbers are going to be close. So for this, if I multiply, I could start the list. Again, the bigger number is going to be negative. So 1ab times negative 110ab. And then if I do 2 times 110 divided by 2, 555, and keep listing. However, some of you are going to get really good at this, and you got to realize that the numbers have to be side by side. So if I do 10 times 11, so 10a times actually this should have been just a 1a times 110b. These are going to be my factors. So let's try it. So 5a squared, rewrite it, plus 10a minus 11b minus 22b squared. Going to make groups. My greatest common factor here is going to be 5a. So once I divide, I get a plus 2. Over here, again, I need to make it look like a plus 2. So I'm actually going to pull out a GCF of negative 11b. This gives me 1. Hold on. Needs AB. Okay, so then this gets a B. And then here, this is going to be left with an A. And here gets a 2B. And again, my GCF here is my A plus 2B. And then these two get grouped together. So this has a B. This has an A. So this would be the factored form of that when there's two letters at the beginning and the end. So again, we're going to split this up into 2 days. So the homework that you have over the weekend is to do the odds. Then on Monday, we're going to go over these answers one by one. And then Monday night, you're going to do the same lesson again, but you'll do the evens. Now, once you factor these, I highly recommend that you're foiling your answers, okay? That's going to help you check to see if you found the correct factors. Now, again, the book, if you read your textbook pages, they're doing it by guessing and testing. And they're listing the factors of the first term, the factors of the second term, and then they're trying to find the one that works together. When you're doing this, let me just give you a heads up. There's only in the numbers 1 through 43. I don't want to see a bunch of prime written. There's only 3 answers that are prime. Okay? The rest can all be factored. And actually, I'm just going to tell you what they are. Number 7 is prime, and number 19 is prime. Okay, the other prime answer is an even number. So for tonight's homework, that's due on Monday, there's only 2 that can't be done. And you would write the word prime. All the other ones, you should be able to factor. I don't want to see you writing the word prime. Everybody understand what I'm saying? So when you can't factor something, when there's no 2 numbers that are going to multiply and then add to give you the middle, you're going to write that it's prime. Okay, so that is 5, 9. And these are the more difficult trinomials.